It was a typical morning in North Hollywood. The streets hummed with the usual activity as cars whizzed by and the smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Inside the Bank of America branch on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, employees were preparing for the day. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow on the polished floors. But in the shadows of the parking lot, two men sat in a white van, fully armored and heavily armed. They were not ordinary criminals. They were former military men with precise plans and a ruthless determination. Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu had been plotting this heist for weeks. They weren't just after money. They wanted to make a statement. They wanted to go out with a bang. Phillips turned to Matasareanu, his face grim. "It's time." They donned their full-body armor and helmets, weapons in hand. Phillips clicked the safety off his automatic rifle, and Matasareanu followed suit. The moment had arrived. Inside the bank, customers were still filling out deposit slips when the doors burst open. The two masked men stormed in, shouting at everyone to get down. Phillips and Matasareanu were fast, their movements calculated. The men had rehearsed this moment countless times. They quickly subdued the security guards and moved to the vault. But something went wrong. The vault door didn't open. The robbers had failed to anticipate the delay, and the ticking clock of their plans suddenly grew louder. They could hear the police sirens in the distance, faint but growing closer. Panic began to set in. "We don't have time," Phillips yelled. Matasareanu was already scanning the room. He grabbed a few bags of cash and pushed Phillips toward the exit. But it wasn't enough. The two criminals had underestimated how quickly the police would respond. Outside, Officer Jack Taylor was the first to arrive at the scene. He had been patrolling just a few blocks away when the call came through. He had no idea that today would become the most harrowing of his career. The usual suspects, bank robbers, simple criminals looking for an easy escape. But when Taylor spotted Phillips and Matasareanu running from the bank, armed to the teeth, he froze for a moment. These weren't your average thieves. Without waiting for backup, Taylor made the decision to act. He pulled up his cruiser and got out, taking cover behind it as he pulled out his sidearm. He radioed for backup, but Phillips and Matasareanu were already firing. The first shots rang out, and Officer Taylor barely managed to dive behind the cruiser before bullets shattered his rear window. He couldn't get a clean shot. The men were too well protected. Just as the shootout seemed to reach its peak, a twist of fate shifted the balance of power. The robbers had been expecting the police to be disorganized, but what they hadn't planned for was the arrival of a SWAT team. The team, led by Lieutenant John Ward, had been monitoring the situation from a nearby rooftop. They knew they had to act fast. Ward gave the signal, and the SWAT team moved in under the cover of darkness. They breached the perimeter and flanked the robbers, who were still focused on fighting the officers outside. A bullet from one of the SWAT officers struck Matasareanu in the leg, forcing him to the ground. Phillips turned to see his partner go down, and for the first time, fear flashed across his face. The men had planned for everything, but not for the relentless precision of the SWAT team. Phillips, now desperate, continued to fire as he retreated toward the van, but the police were closing in. They had the perimeter locked down. As Phillips reached the van, he turned to face the officers. His chest heaved with panic, but he refused to surrender. He was not going to be taken alive. With his last breath, Phillips fired his weapon one final time, but it was over. The officers returned fire. Phillips collapsed, his body riddled with bullets. Matasareanu, still alive but severely injured, was taken into custody. The aftermath of the 44-minute battle was a scene of utter devastation. The streets were littered with broken glass and blood. The robbers had been killed, but at a great cost. 12 officers were wounded and 3 civilians had lost their lives. It had been a massacre. In the days that followed, the city of Los Angeles would reflect on the events of that day, trying to make sense of how a routine bank robbery turned into one of the most intense shootouts in history. Officer Emily Harris sat in her car, exhausted, hands shaking as she tried to process what had just occurred. Her mind replayed the sounds of the gunfire, the terrified cries of the hostages, and the images of her fallen colleagues. She had never been trained for this kind of chaos, but she had survived. In the end, she had made it through the 44 minutes of hell, but she knew she would never forget the city had been changed forever, and so had she. Like and subscribe for more real-life crime stories and investigations.